Hi there, I'm Cassia Strab with Music for Your Inbox, and today we are going to chat with Phillip David Stearns, who is our video artist this month, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about his film and how he made it, because he is the sound artist and the video artist all in one. So I'm just going to invite Phil to join us.
Did we work?
We
Is
worked.
it working? Hold
Hi,
on.
Phil. I can see your eyes.
Wait, with all the reflections?
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. So you're outside. Where are you? Colorado?
I'm in Cheeseman Park in Denver.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice
Yeah,
day.
it's like a couple of blocks away from my place. The internet reception, cell phone reception is probably not much different. So I was trying to find a nicer location than my apartment and with better reception.
This is gorgeous. Love
See
it.
if this works.
Love it. I can be outside vicariously.
Yeah. Well, I want to start off by saying thank you to you and Jen for inviting me back to be the main feature for this month. It's cool to do the postcard last year, and now I'm back.
Cool. I mean, that's part of like one of the main goals that not main goals, but like one of our core values was to have artists kind of in different capacities featured on the series, and to not have a group of people who, we don't want to be so insular that we only represent certain people, but at the same time we don't want to be one and done. So we just loved your postcard work, and I was thinking about like the programming coming up, and we were like, oh wait, we know a video artist already, because you actually kind of made a video with sound in order to make your postcard, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
This was like finding a way to get you into this new format, so having you be the actual video artist. I've watched your video a million times because I really liked it, but also we were trying to figure out what to write about it, what to say, and I'm wondering if you could kind of describe like technically the process that you went through to make. First of all, could you pronounce the name of your film?
Oh yeah. It's Sin Ak. It kind of looks like it kind of looks like snack. There's an art organization director out here who loves to call it snack.
Feels like a snack.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to make it? Because I know that the audio and the video are directly linked. Is there a way to explain what you're doing?
Yeah. I'm gonna try to start off as simply as I can.
Okay.
Sin Ak. So first off, the name comes from part of the TCP/IP handshake that happens when computers connect to one another over the internet. So that kind of clues you in a little bit. The sound and the visuals are being derived from network traffic, and this is internet network traffic or stuff related to the TCP/IP protocol. And the kinds of traffic that are being used to generate that work they're kind of one part, they're like diagnostic sort of networking tools that are sending packets like pings to the devices, and then others are more malicious in nature, where those pings are flood pings, which are usually meant to overwhelm a device or to test the limits of how a device can respond. And then there's some other things like port scans, things that maybe a network administrator would use to discover things about the network, or in the wrong hands could be abused to launch more sophisticated cyber-related attacks.
So when you're making the film, you're pretty much like recording what you're doing, like screen recording. And then what are you doing? Like, are you influencing what the network is receiving and sending, or are you kind of subject to whatever's happening?
Yeah, so the basic setup is I have my laptop, and on my laptop I'm running an application that allows me to attack or probe the device that's producing the visuals and the sound.
Okay.
So on one side, what you're seeing and hearing are me like deliberately launching pings to produce like little rhythmic clicks, and sometimes I'm flooding it with pings with specifically crafted data that, when played back by the device, will actually sound like tones or pitches. And then there are other things that I can do to tell the device to like listen to the Wi-Fi traffic in the area, and that gets to be like really kind of chaotic and noisy, very arrhythmic. It adds a lot of texture, and it's really dependent on what Wi-Fi channel is being picked up, and I can kind of control that. And there's also a little more nefarious thing that I can do is tell the receiving device to set up a rogue access point. So based on the Wi-Fi traffic, I can actually see what kind of Wi-Fi networks other devices in the area are trying to connect to. And that can be, so say you walk out of your house and you detach from your home network. You might be in like downtown and your device is still trying to connect to a Wi-Fi network. And depending on, certain factors, it may actually broadcast the name of your home network. So what I've set up on the, I guess the target side is the scanner that will look for those packets. And if I'm in the area, or if you're in the area of this thing and it's broadcasting that your home network name, I'll pick it up. And what I can do with that is create a network where I am that matches your home network. And if your device tries to connect to that, then you will be pulled into the piece. So there's that kind of aspect to it that, I don't know. It doesn't really happen often because I think things are sort of like configured a little bit more securely, but it does have that under the hood. That's funny.
And that kind of like capability is sort of baked into this.
Yeah.
So like, okay, with a lot of your work, your like previous work, I'm thinking of like your analog synthesizer days and stuff like that. It seems like you accept a certain amount of chance and variability in your work, and there's a certain amount of control, so that you're kind of it's not like you're playing the piano and you're like, I push this button and exactly this result occurs every time. It's like there are things that are just kind of like, oh well, that particular circuit was doing this kind of thing in that moment. But with this piece, it feels like very intentional. Like when I'm looking at the visuals, I can't help but think of like fabric and textiles and weaving. At least for me, that's what it brought up. And in order to create something that's that intentional, like a quilt, I imagine there has to be a high level of control. But I'm curious, like, is there a lot of variability in there? Like, how's that working?
There's an incredible amount of variability, and there's also an incredible amount of control, and they're both in equal proportions. So I can control when the variability is off the charts, I guess. So I ultimately have my hand on that lever, but the kinds of things that I mean, I feel like if I had absolute control over the entire output, it could tend to be very boring, because there's like a level of complexity that is involved when you're just kind of like opening up and listening to random Wi-Fi signals, or certain certain port scans or vulnerability scans will produce a certain visual pattern or sound, and that becomes kind of like equivalent to a sample. They're not going to be exactly the same all the time, but I know what kind of flavor they achieve. Likewise with the Wi-Fi scanning, after scanning through all of the channels, I kind of get a sense like, okay, this channel is kind of sparse. So if I want like random clicks and pops that are kind of sparse, I'll go to this channel, but it may be a different channel the next time I do the performance. So there's even like larger scale variability. Now, when it comes to the visuals, I actually do have control over a few parameters, like whether or not to display line breaking characters or spaces. I guess you could call this special characters. The other is, and that will cause things to scroll very rapidly if I'm displaying the line breaking characters, and it will slow it down to create those blocks if I'm not displaying them. The other thing is to print color or not. And I can also shift where the color palette starts and how it like is interpreting the different data that's inside those packets. But ultimately, the content of those packets and the content of that data produces the patterns and the visuals.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of like you're really, I mean, your art practice seems to welcome in a little bit of chaos, which I think is really helpful. And it does shape it into these unpredictable things. There's this pull quote from something that you wrote that we keep using as we talk about your piece, which is like, if it sounds raw, that's because it's supposed to be. And I feel like there's an aspect to your film. I mean, this is kind of cool because last time you and I talked, it was like we were talking about what people would get in the mail, but at this point people have like received their videos and they have watched it and they have seen their postcards, so we can kind of get a little in the weeds. But when I was watching it the first time, I felt like it became a video sort of about the whole space I was in, because was at my computer, I was working, and then I downloaded your video, and then I started to watch it, and then full screen, and it looked like my computer was kind of being hacked and then just sort of taken over. And then it was really beautiful. And you can start to associate all sorts of weird things with that. You can start to feel like, oh, you're seeing the soul of the computer or something, which of course is absolutely not what's happening. But it feels like the entire object of my laptop or my desktop monitor, I'm like waving at directions of things where they are, which is not helpful to
Just point at the frame.
I'm like, there. But it felt like it became an art object into itself, which like it ceased to be a monitor sending me information, and it was like, oh, this is my whole laptop is a part of this. And I'm curious, like, I know you made it as a video piece so people could, and we will screen it in an actual screening. But I'm curious, because you're building it on computers, were you thinking about the computer being the art object as well as just the screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, like, usually when I perform this, I develop the piece first as a performance, and usually in the performance context, I'm projecting on a wall. But the foundational hardware was meant to be installed, and it was only sound at first, and I started only thinking about performing it later. And then I realized, wait, these are just kind of like, they're almost like listening devices in a way, and I started developing them for screens specifically to be embedded in different locations. So it was kind of like accidental in one case, but also coming out of a particular type of intent that now with the pre-recorded material that exists as a video, that it turns the device that it's playing on into kind of like not only the vessel of the work, but a part of the work, an integral part of the work.
Yeah, yeah. That was cool. I didn't know if that was intentional or not, because it just sort of, I mean, I guess it is intentional because you saw it happen to you and you're like, great, this is what's happening to everyone. But it really does start to feel like because I think about your relationship to technology, and it seems a little fraught, or a little, if I could be so bold, because you're a person who uses technology at the heart of their art practice, and has for like since I've known you, which is 400 years, and let's not speak of that. But anyhow, but even in the phases of like circuit bending and building circuits and all of that, and working with computers and also analog electronics, so technology's been the heart of your practice, or at least a key component. Yet at the same time, you're a person who doesn't really want to own a car, and who's definitely seeking to be like not in front of your phone all of the time. And so I'm just curious if it felt like a very Phil piece, where it's like, oh, I'm using like a ton of technology to ask you to examine your technology, like my hardware, if you will, in a totally different light. And yeah, I guess that's just me babbling. It's not really a question in there, but I mean, is that something you think about, or am I just like, kind of extrapolating? Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, I think that's something that I hope, that's an observation that I hope anybody looking at the work that I produce kind of picks up on, even if they don't know me or where that work is coming from, because there's like a certain level of refinement and like polished, like there's kind of like a little bit of a sheen on what I do, but also there's like this very like raw kind of direct and I guess messy side of it that sometimes doesn't get picked up, but it comes from this idea of approaching technology as something that we have kind of let into our lives in a way that it's without really understanding that it's us, it's other people, that it's not these inert or soulless or like automaton type robots that we see in sci-fi that aspire to be us. Like that's kind of like that's just a show. That's almost like a disguise, where the truth is we build tools. That's like humans, we build tools. Language is a tool, like all expression, whether it be verbal, visual, or in the way that we build and structure things. That's us. That's our technology. So when we have a device, when we have a particular thing that we use, whether it's a tool for us or a tool for somebody else to use us, that maybe is sort of like a question that I leave open in some work, but it's something that we made, and it's something that can be made or unmade or remade. And that's what I tend to focus on in the work when I make something. Is there's this tool that I'm picking up. What am I exploring through it? And at the root of it, if I'm not sort of questioning how it was made in that exploration, I'm kind of like I'm not at a point where I feel like I'm going to be satisfied with the outcome.
Yeah, well, I feel like you have this fluency with technology that eludes a lot of us, so that we don't feel like we're capable of interacting with it in the way that you do. But then I feel like something that you've done in your practice, even in the early days of like leading circuit bending classes and what have you, where you're really inviting people to do that, and to, like you say, to not let the technology rule you, but to let you use it as a tool and to understand that you can turn it off. I think that's
but not just turn it off, but turn it into something that is more you, right? Because the technology is other people, but if you're not part of that process of making it, then like you kind of are giving away your agency,
right,
in a certain sense. So I feel like the work that I'm doing is showing like you can have a degree of agency, and making the work accessible is important, because if it's not accessible, then you can very easily miss that.
Well, and something that's occurred to me as I was like watching your film, and like the many times I've watched it, is that it started to feel site specific. If that's, I know it's a jargony word that everyone, like, oh, I play a concert outside, all of a sudden I'm site specific or something like that. But I mean, in that it's very uniquely designed for people who are going to be watching it alone at home on a computer or on a like their own personal device. And I was curious if that was part of how you conceived of it, because we did ask you to make the piece like for Music for Your Inbox, and you already were familiar with our platform. Is that, did that kind of go into considering how you made the film?
I think it was just kind of like that was the default. I think it just kind of worked out that way. There wasn't too much like thought or intent behind it, in that regard. I mean, I feel like when you were mentioning site specificity, I was like, well, yeah, actually, if you pause it, you can see like the names of the local Wi-Fi networks. There's that degree of like the location where it was produced is imprinted on in a very real way. But then by site specific, this broader idea of existing for the device and existing as a way to point people towards an awareness of the device that the work is on, not only the work itself. I think that's something that I've been working on in a lot of other pieces and a lot of other projects, and it's kind of something now that kind of just happens because that's the way that I've been working. And I'm now thinking, like, should I add this as like a little criteria that, like, in a, like, my list of, does this work hit all the checkpoints, or like check off all the boxes? Okay, yes, it does. It's ready.
Well, I feel like something that your work does, at least for me, is that it ends up pointing at a bunch of other things, which I think is,
that part is intentional.
Right. And I mean, even I remember when you did the postcard for Sarah Bell Reed's piece, I was able to, I was like, oh, they're doing the same thing, only they're opposite each other. Like, the final format of Sarah's was this analog synthesizer thing, and the final version of yours was this postcard that we took. But for this particular pairing this month, the Craftwork Collective burlap with the woven fiber octaves, I was like, oh my gosh.
Amazing pairing.
But, thank you. But that was part of your practice way back in the day when you had just light sensors, woven into burlap, I think.
Yeah,
right?
It was burlap. And they were light sensors and very basic CMOS music synthesizers.
Yeah. And they were like inviting interaction. I mean, at least I invited me to interact. I walked up and was like, what happens if I put my hand here, and if I walk by it, and if I stand here?
Or I intentionally put the lights so that people walking by would cast shadows, and then they would start making sound.
Yeah, that was really neat. And I feel like that was what you were on the press. That was what you were doing right when you left Los Angeles. And then to see other people carrying on that tradition of sort of weaving, but with fiber optics and stuff. Anyhow, just again, like with everything pointing at everything, I really appreciate that about your work. And I wonder, is that something you're doing intentionally, or is it just that you're constantly thinking about everything? So of course it kind of comes out.
A little bit of both. When I make a piece, it's not just about like one idea, because there's everything that has come, that I've done and that I've experienced before, that sort of like comes into play. And I like to draw on a lot of different references. And I'll pick materials that are kind of saturated, and sometimes, like more recently, I've been trying to control a little bit less how I'm picking things, and how, like, what kinds of references and connections could possibly come out of a piece. In that regard, it's kind of like me trying to embrace mess or chaos in a different way. I'm not sure if you can hear this plane overhead.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. But love it. I can tell you're not in LA because there's not just constant helicopters.
Right, helicopters or like passenger jets. No, the airport is way out.
Right,
way out east.
Right. So, is this piece? I'm going to say it wrong already. CNAC? Am I saying that right?
Sin?
Oh, CNAC.
Like synchronize.
Yeah, but is
and
this
then
the
acknowledge?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
CNAC. So, is CNAC is part of like a series, or is part of something that is like was a jumping off point, and now this is like the thing you're doing currently, right?
It's one of many things I'm doing currently. So like I was saying, like there are a lot of ideas floating around. I'm thinking about everything, everywhere, all at once. But no, there's just like a lot of things that there's like this soup of things that I've done, things that I'm curious about, and then sometimes the brain cells will collide and the ideas will spawn another idea, and then I'll get excited and try to explore that, put it down, and two other ideas somewhere else will collide, and I'm focusing on that because they're like different through lines, and even though one may stop, it doesn't mean I'm done. It's just that something else has become the focus of my attention, or like I've done what I can do here, and now it's time to return to this other idea. For CNAC, that was for me, around the 2016 elections and the outcomes, I was trying to figure out what the hell happened. How did we get here? There are these like technologies that are going on that I've just kind of been ignoring, and I wanted to kind of explore how the internet was put together and maybe try to get a different insight through understanding the technology, how it's shaping us.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned into kind of like an obsession almost with cyber warfare. And then Synapse kind of developed out of that, which was, how do I turn these tools into an experience that gets people closer to a way of like a possible gateway towards an understanding of what's happening, because a lot of these domains are very abstract. They don't have a physical form. Even being kind of like inaccessible in their complexity, and that they're like complicated technical things. So like the work for that project, or this project in particular, was to try to, or it was coming out of a way of making that accessible, but starting from that point. But then there's also like the textiles. Like, I've been curious about the relationship between early computers and kind of weaving as being a sort of early computational medium,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of tie-ins between that. So like, I'm also still working on textile designs and textile-based projects. And more recently, I've been translating cyber weapons from the Russo-Ukrainian war that's currently ongoing and brutal into textiles that I'm then fashioning into like bombs, and setting up marketplaces that are modeled off of textile bazaars, as a way of sort of giving physical presence to this sort of hybrid reality of a current real-time war that's going on, that I feel like the horror of it, and then also the kinds of the way that everybody conveys what's happening based upon a certain political slant. Like, everything is tainted in a way, to sort of find a way of manifesting it that is free of those sorts of burdens, or those biases, or at least possesses different biases. Like, that's kind of where all of this is. That's what I'm working on now, or what I worked on most recently.
Oh, so it sounds like it's the same kind of ongoing through line in your work, or you're taking these concepts that you have somehow been able to wrap your head around, and then like presenting them for people, just as like, this is what this is.
Yeah, this is, or like, this thing exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily like, this is what this is, but I want you to get curious about it. What you do beyond that, that's up to you. But now at least you've had this encounter.
Right. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I often see you as a person who's translating the technological world into the like physical world, or at least the world I can understand. I've always appreciated that about your work. So yeah, I was kind of, I mean, you sort of were talking about some of your future projects and things you're interested in. Do you feel like you want to pursue all of these avenues evenly, or are you kind of focusing your direction on one particular project right now?
Right now I don't have a studio, so it's hard to do some of the. So what I was just talking about with the translation of the Russian malware into textile bomb plushies, that kind of set me down a trajectory of working with soft sculpture a little bit more, in relation to, like this combination of cyber warfare, conventional warfare, soft sculpture, and the like that's something that requires space that I don't have right now. So I've kind of like put that on hold, and what I'm working with right now is I'm going back to some of the light and sound performances that are basically like reducing media to, or like video media back to just pulses of light and sound, and sort of working with very, very like elemental units and building up compositions and experiences from that.
Cool.
So I feel like for me that line of work is a little more fun. Anyways, I need to take a break from the heaviness.
Yeah, well, that's part of the deal, is that we all have to shoulder it together, right? So you can carry it for a while, and then someone else needs to think about it for a while, and collectively we can move forward. But you're right, no, a single person can't carry that the entire time. I really hope that you end up getting a new studio, because that sounds really exciting. What you're just talking about.
It'll happen. I mean, I think even if I don't get a studio at some point, I've already been thinking about, all right, where am I going to find? I got to find some material. I know where to get some cheap fabrics, but
right.
Yeah, I'll just like cut and sew in my apartment if I have to.
Well, and there is that DIY element to what I've always admired, how you close those gaps in knowledge yourself. Where you're like, oh, I want to connect these two things together. Okay, I'll learn how to solder, and then that becomes that. Or you're like, I want to weave these, but I want to do it at scale, and then you find out how to manufacture textiles. I mean,
Internet is a wonderful thing. Sometimes you just have to tell it what you're looking for, and it will give you, like, sometimes it'll scar you, but most of the times it'll give you what you're looking for.
Yeah, but viewing it as a tool, as you were saying earlier, like, it's something that you can use to your advantage, and it's like a tremendous asset. But yeah, the moderation being the key.
Yeah. That was the topic of, I think, an interview that I was catching on public radio here recently, was that the subject of the interview was so out of touch with reality because they made a conscious decision to use the devices and the technology that's on them as a tool, and only go to them when you know specifically what it is that you want. I'm not so disciplined. It's hard to do that. But yeah, it's definitely it's a mindset that I appreciate.
Yeah.
Strive.
Well, but I also think
tools.
the sort of rabbit holes can lead you to new discoveries and stuff too, right? So if we're really, you
got to balance the rabbit holes with the is this platform now using me or abusing me?
Right. But it's having that awareness in the moment, and like sort of that mindfulness to bring yourself back to the actual moment of like, what are you doing?
Right.
That's kind of a theme in your work as well that I've noticed. So anyhow, I really love the video, like the one that we've released this month, Synac, because like all the stuff I said earlier, it really made me think a lot about technology. It made me see the computer kind of as a beautiful art object, which I don't have that connection to my computer in that way, like my personal home computer or my laptop. Usually it's just the bringer of more email. And so it was great. And I actually showed it to a friend of mine. I was having like a art meetup in my studio, and it was before it was released or anything. I was like, you just have to see this. Like, and just like, it's kind of like to watch it happen to somebody else is kind of amazing too. Just sort of like it's, I don't know, like the ultimate hacker video or something, like in a sci-fi movie or something, where the computer takes over and becomes sentient and starts like telling you its life story or something.
It makes me happy to hear that you've had such a positive response to it, because I'm so wrapped up in all the other things that go on that it's hard for me to know how other people perceive it. Right? Because like once you've gone under the hood, you have a particular way of approaching and seeing things, and it's really difficult to kind of step back and say, oh, this is actually like great as just an experience, or this works without having to know these things, but to know how it's actually working for other people in terms of like how they're perceiving not only the work, but how it changes their perception of their device. It's really valuable. So
yeah, and I don't think it's like a teaching tool for like how to love your computer. Like, that's not the point. And the things that you were talking about earlier are kind of terrifying, right? That like we're all leaving these digital traces everywhere, and people, not technology, can hop in and be like, hi, I live here now, and you're like, oh, I didn't want you to live here. I mean, So there are some very deep themes that you're dealing with, but I think the result, even if you don't know about all of the steps that you went through to get to the final result, the result when you watch it is just, it is really beautiful. And it is this like digital quilt that sort of weaves itself on your screen. And I love the rawness of the audio, because it's almost like this computer is like learning how to sing or something, and it's like not very good at it yet. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, geez, thanks. But no, it's not going to sing like Sinatra covers anytime soon.
Right, but I'm saying it's sort of like I am trying to communicate with you, and this is the sound I make. If you're like, okay, like I'm here for this, but then it does actually get quite sort of classically musical in a way. But in the beginning with those little blurp, blurp, and it's just trying to sort of spit out and communicate with you. Yeah, I really connected with that. Anyhow, so, and all these other projects you're talking about too, I just feel like we're going to see you again on Music for Your Inbox. Like, because you're just, you know.
The next time we're definitely going to have to put a strobe warning on.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm actually working with strobe lights now. I've found a way to rig up at least 8 of them now, but it could be expanded kind of indefinitely. Although strobes get expensive, but it's computer-controlled strobe lights, and not with a typical DMX. So I can do some things that are a little non-standard for lighting control.
Wow. Because of course you are. Sorry.
Yeah, I like building things. I like building things from scratch. It helps me understand how they work, right?
No, I get that.
Yeah.
I am not that person, but I live with a person like that. He is 6 years old, but nonetheless, it's a way that people's minds work, and they're just like, I need to understand this. And I've learned the limits.
It is for me to take it apart.
Yeah, or to ask your parents 1,000 questions. And it turns out I don't actually know how vending machines work, was the takeaway last week.
I mean, I don't even know how vending machines work. I have some idea, but ultimately.
Right, but if someone keeps asking you more and more, right, you're going to hit a wall pretty quick.
Yeah, and then you're going to have to like buy a vending machine and then like take it apart in the garage.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe your new studio would be my garage if you are willing to take apart a vending machine.
I mean, yeah.
Anyhow. Well, thanks for chatting with me, Phil. It's always a pleasure, and it'll be great to, I don't know, like whatever your next video turns out to be, or postcard or whatever, you know, like we're kind of here for it. I think our audience is really interested in like what you're up to. And
well, I'm excited about all the upcoming program for Music for Your Inbox. You and Jen have been doing an amazing job. I feel like, I mean, I love the work that has been released in the past, but I feel like this year in particular, you've stepped it up. It's been great, and thanks for including me in part of that too. So
really you're every video we want to see them.
Okay, I'll send them to you.
First,
you just tell me when you've had enough.
That sounds good. All right, well, people can still see your film. If they go to our website, they can get access to the video, and they can send you their thoughts afterwards, because, of course, we have the audience response button. And so, reach out and ask questions and all that. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Yeah, see you next time.
Okay, bye.